There's this temptation that for people, an awful lot of them, what free will is, oh, you're given these attributes, what you choose to do with it. And because that's inspiring as hell. You look at somebody who grew up under awful circumstances and yet somehow they surmounted it with incredible self-discipline. But all that happened is they lucked out that that part of their brain happened to be good at what was needed to beat enormous odds against them and pull this off.
Okay, so this is where it starts to get problematic with psychology and the approaches to self-betterment and self-improvement. Essentially, what we're talking about with the term self there can be entirely dissolved when we start to consider the idea of free will not being existent. And this is a problem because I can't prove otherwise. I can't not agree with determined. This is why we have to be very careful about how we apply what science and philosophy show us to the psychological process and prognosis and pathologizing situation. And I did a critique of Sapolsky's presentation on schizophrenia a while back, and I think I'm noticing some bias in a lot of the approaches that I'm seeing now coming from the solely prognostic approach. So the idea is that you've been given a diagnostic label, and you want to be able to tell yourself that you can indeed do your best to work with it or eliminate it. So in the way that Sapolsky just described this, unfortunately, there is the potential for people to absorb that and consider themselves to be one of those people that just wasn't lucky enough to get those genes that were the pull yourself up by your bootstraps genes or whatever, and thus I must submit to the whims of my neurochemistry. Thus I have the schizophrenia, or I am schizophrenic, I am ADHD, I am autistic, I have the anxiety, I have caught the anxiety and I can do nothing about it. Like, that's the kind of attitude that we need to be very, very wary about. And I talk a lot about this in the books that I'm working on. It's a huge problem in the United States, unfortunately. A huge problem that has affected me deeply for many years, and I'm so glad to have pulled the veil back on that and learned other ways to approach this. I am an incompatibilist determinist. I feel like there's not really a whole lot of ways for me to see ontologically otherwise. But when it comes to epistemology, when it comes to how the human learns to be in the world and the human-based learning heuristics, I want those to be based on a sense of self. I want those to be very secured and those to be very well established in the people that I'm working with. I don't want them to be feeling beholden as I did with my OCD, with my ADHD, and with my auditory processing disorders, and my central language processing disorder that made me consider for years the idea that I have a problem processing my central language and that I may not speak as well and as fluently as other people did. The amount of ways that we can be misguided by our own language and by the language and labels that society provides us is nearly infinite. The ways that we can be sabotaged and diverted away from our destinies or our best lived selves, there are a lot of ways that can go wrong. So Sapolsky uses a statistic.
You take 5-year-olds and the socioeconomic status of their parents is already a significant predictor of how well their frontal cortex works.
That is already setting up people for failure. That's already setting up people for the self-defeating, limiting beliefs, as we talk about in cognitive behavioral therapy. Like that sets people up to form these limiting beliefs. So we could say, I'm already starting to see the ways that I'm struggling in ways that a lot of other people don't. Could this be because of my errant upbringing? And so now I can start to blame that. Let me explain this more clearly. So as we go along through life, we can find infinite numbers of ways to be disappointed and infinite ways to be grateful, and infinite ways for us to see ourselves as beholden to the world, as well as infinite ways to have control over ourselves in the way that we identify and interact with the world. So I could say to myself, wow, it sure is looking pretty obvious to me now that given all these years, there must have been something in my past that set it up for me to be like this, that I just can't get past it. And so now, given all these examples, it's now time for me to just accept the fact that I am neurodivergent. I have diverged from the norm, the typical, whatever that is. And so that, again, leaves me in this state of limited beliefs, like I am stuck. I am in a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, as we talk about in CBT as well. That kind of language and the self-betterment and the existentialism, like the I exist, I am an individual that has power over all of this biological predisposition, that is very much absent from the diagnostic and especially the prognostic and pathologizing approaches that we have in Western medicine. And again, we're trying, like nobody's at fault for this. We're all trying. We're trying to figure this whole thing out. And this is one of the methods, a very strong, well-examined empirical method, is neuroendocrinology and biology and human behavioral biology. So through the examination of neurochemistry and biology, the bioecological system, we have a well-measured account of how our bioecological systems affect our behavior, but we lack a well-measured account of our agency and how that works. We can turn to various philosophers for this. Sartre, Becker, Jung, Kant, the list is very long. People that have written about our human willpower and our ability to establish our will, or free will. We are affected, not determined, by reality. Even if we are, it doesn't help us to tell ourselves that we are so very affected and lack such free will. This is Dennett's argument, where he titled one of his lectures, "Stop Telling People They Don't Have Free Will." It may indeed be the case that they don't have it, but it's certainly damaging and limiting to tell people that they don't. And Sapolsky talks about this in his book as well. He's not ignorant of this fact. We don't understand the causal mechanisms underpinning the process of self-improvement, or the growth mindset, or motivation, or introspection, or confidence, or any of the human abilities to overcome our diagnostic conditions or our behavioral habits. Anyways, that's all I'll say about that for now. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this.